West Coast Biennial. We are going to be taking questions in the chat on the on Facebook stream. We're not actually on Facebook. We're in a different app, so we can't see your chat yet. But I'm very pleased to introduce David Pagel, our juror for the 2021 West Coast Biennial. And I'm going to let him talk about himself. He's like to talk about what it's like to be a newspaper art critic, among other things, and how he, works in this medium and what he does to produce exhibitions like the one we have today. So, without ado, I'm going to expand him, contract me, and mute.
Thanks so much, Julia. I would like to share my screen. Can you click that on so I can start going over my PowerPoint and make that huge, or does that stay the same size? I think that's fine. So thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks to all the artists who submitted work to the Biennial. I really, really enjoyed doing jury duty. I really enjoy looking at work that I'm not knowing what I'm going to get, and I enjoyed looking at everything in the show and picked ones I thought other people should see more of too. And tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do as a critic, because I think lots of people have kind of strange or odd ideas about what critics actually do. And I'm just going to go over what I think I'm doing, and then I'm really happy to take any questions at all after 40 minutes or so. And I'm happy to answer them or try to answer them or duck them gracefully. But I'm a newspaper critic. Let's see if I can. Oh, I might need some help getting my moving through my PowerPoint.
I don't have any control over your PowerPoint. It's not clicking forward for you?
Yeah, I can't. It just stays on the main. Gosh, it shrunk there.
Yeah, it is not.
Sorry about that.
It worked the other night.
Yeah. It would be great if I could get it bigger. Should I try?
Is this being recorded? Yes. I can. Okay. I'm going to have a reply.
Did you mute yourself?
Oh, is that sharing? Can you see my screen now? Did I lose everyone?
I can see your screen. Now I'm seeing everybody's screen.
So when I click to this, do you see the PowerPoint? It says,
yeah.
So okay, so I'll go from here. Oh, let me see.
There we go.
Okay, so first I'm going to say a few words about the importance of distance and how art works. I think a lot of people think that it's a critic's job to get close to the artist, to interview the artist, talk with the artist, get to know the artist, and the artist explains what the work is about, and then the critic conveys that to readers. I don't work that way at all. In fact, I don't want to talk in a way to the artist at all. I want to talk to the work the artist made. So I'm really interested in the artist making something, putting it out in the world and leaving it alone in that world, and then me coming upon that thing that the artist has made and interviewing it, interrogating it, hanging out with it, communing with it, talking with it, getting on with it. And then from that, reporting back to my viewers to my readers, what kind of an experience I had. And I actually think that it's really important that artists do one kind of thing and critics do another kind of thing, in that in the distance between those two things, some kind of like electrical charge zaps or zips or jumps, and something like experience and knowledge and pleasure happen. But it's not about putting those two things together, the art and the critics. A lot of critics think that they're artists and what they're doing is actually making the art, and I don't think that at all. I think the artists make the art, the critics write the criticism, the readers read the criticism, the readers come to their own conclusions, the readers talk to other readers and start to argue, and this big dialogue comes up out of that. So what I do when I go see a show is try to clear my head as much as possible. I know it's impossible to get rid of all my expectations, perspective, viewpoint, prejudices, things I'm drawn to and not drawn to, but I try really hard as a critic not to have preconceived notions about what I want or what I want to see or what I need to see. I really try to just be this like blank, inert sponge and absorb everything I can about the work and what it's doing. So I really try to engage it on its own terms and not go in right away and say like, oh, here's my checklist of things I need from a piece or I want from a piece. And if this thing isn't filling out those terms, it's failing. I don't have any sense of a checklist of qualities I'm looking for. I'm actually looking for something that I've never seen before. So I try to get my own prejudices out of the way, absorb everything, and then try to make sense of it. And I do that at the show. When I go visit shows, it drives me crazy when the dealers will come up to me and like, 10 steps into the gallery and they'll say, what do you think? And I always think, well, nothing yet. I'm kind of slow. It takes me time to start thinking things. I'm just here. And I also really can't stand it when the dealers like start to tell me what the work is about, what the work means, and how I should feel in front of the work. And to me, that's a dealer who has no respect for the work on the wall. Speak. It's really insulting to me because I mean, I may not be brilliant, but I kind of interview the works on my own without the dealer telling me what to think. And the worst thing is, like, even if the dealer, most of the time, they say the most inane things you can imagine, but even if they did say something brilliant, this great insight into the work, there's no way I could ever use that in my review because it's not mine, it's theirs. What I write about is my thoughts. So that's what I do at the exhibition. And then when I go home and sit at my desk and start typing away at my computer, what I try to do is understand the experience I just had. And I always try to understand those experiences, of course, in relation to everything I've ever experienced before. But I try to get down what's there. And I do that by writing. I write about things to figure out what I think about them. And it's really different from just like going to a show and enjoying it, and then going to a show and experiencing it, and then having to kind of be tasked with the duty of explaining that experience to readers and convincing them that it's worthwhile. So in a sense, my criticism is something like travel writing, where when I go to an exhibition and I experience work, I kind of like go or try to go into the world that work makes, to have a journey or a trip or an adventure, and then come back at my desk and account for that adventure to my readers, saying, I saw this, I did this, I felt that. And it's a little bit like travel writing. It's completely, utterly, and wholly, totally subjective. Anyone else who anyone who says otherwise is lying, or they don't know what they're doing. It's a lot of people say, well, there's nothing objective at all about it, and I say, well, that's absolutely, completely, and totally true, and that it is me having a subjective experience and then sharing that experience with others after having translated it into words and tried to convey it as clearly and distinctly and completely and as vividly as possible, both so that the readers can understand where I was and to also see if they want to go there too, or maybe go there and have a different experience and come back and talk to me about that. A lot of people say, like, well, it's got to be historically important, and history is about being as objective as possible, but it's nothing at all like that. And although I do write for a newspaper, it's not like the news, where I think it is the job of a journalist in the news part of the paper is to tell as complete a story as possible about the truth. And that I think the journalists are trying, by approaching an event or an occurrence or something that happened from as many different perspectives as possible, to tell as full a truth as they can. That's not what I do. What I do is much more like what's on the opinions page than on the front page. It really is about me arguing for something. So I'll go look for work and find things I'm interested in them, and then make passionate and hopefully persuasive arguments about them. A big part of it is simply just bearing witness to what happens when I see a show. I often tell my students, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but actually truthfully, that I don't write about art. As a critic, I write about my experience of art. So I'm not there to tell the objective truth about what the art is, but I am there to tell you as full of a truth as possible about how it affected me. And when I explain that, then I hope you find that to be interesting. So while I said before, I don't look at the work, I try to look at the work and judge it on its own terms, or take it into account on how it wants to be taken into account. Later, I will kind of swing around to think about, well, is that interesting? Is that ambitious? Is that timely? Is that salient? A lot of people ask me, like, well, how do you decide what to write about? I write about stuff that I don't understand. For me, there's nothing more boring than going to a show and understanding everything that's going on in it. I actually go to work to find out things I don't know. I don't go to work to have my prejudices flattered or my opinions shored up. I can't get that from my family. They always do the opposite anyway. But I'm interested in art that actually puts me outside my comfort zone and makes me reach to understand it. And then actually, I'm interested in work that really reorganizes my relationship to the world around me. If I look at a work and think, like, oh, that's a pretty nice painting, it reminds me of these three other artists. In fact, it looks like this artist just took a third of each of those artists and slapped them together and made a new work. So while you can make a really tidy argument about it, it's to me it's boring. So being puzzled or being confused is essential to the process. I really want to see something that I've never seen before that makes me rethink the way I relate to the world. And that for me, it is all about not knowing, about being confused and being in doubt. I'm always in doubt of what I write. I never think like, oh, I figured it out now and it's completely clear. I always think like, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But I always, try my best not to be wrong, but leave that judgment up to the readers. So the goal one for me is to find out what I think about art by writing about art. Goal two is to make the world safe for me. And by that, I simply mean that I don't just go to writing about work to figure out what I think about work. I do that as kind of step one. And then step two is convincing other people that what I think about art actually makes sense to them and kind of makes their world bigger. I get them to agree with me. And I think that in doing that, I can make more room in the world for the works I love, and the works that I find interesting, and the works that I find compelling. I think the works that make the world a better place than it would be without those works in it. And so part of that is getting rid of the works that I think to distract from the pursuit of those things, that get in the way of that. Works that I think are a waste of time, are barking up the wrong tree, are up to things that I'm not interested in, works that are that lead people astray in ways that are unproductive. So it's like, it's in part, it's an inquiry to determine what I think, and the other part is a way to get other people to think like me or see like me or agree with me. I really don't think that as a critic, anyone just believes what I write because I wrote it. I think people are way too smart for that. I think people art criticism because they think art is something special and high flown, but something like, movie critics and looking at Rotten Tomatoes, it's like people people trust their own opinion and what they take. I will read other critics kind of knowing that critics' general understanding of something and then base my judgment of the work on looking at the movie or the art through the lens of that critic. So for example, if there's a critic who I almost always disagree with, and he goes to a movie and hates it and writes that it's terrible, I think, oh, that's probably a movie I want to see. Or if there's a critic whose opinion I admire and trust, when I read her, I'll think like, oh, she found that movie compelling. I think I'll check it out for the same reason. So I don't think that people just believe critics for what they say. I think that people actually engage critics by getting to know the critic, by reading them over time, and then over time can assess what they're saying in terms of what they're looking at, just based on what they've said before. I guess like if there's one single thing I want to do as a critic, is to make people see more than they saw before they read my review. Those are the kinds of reviews that I like the most. I love reading something that makes my world bigger, that makes me see more than I saw, that makes me see that there's more to reality than immediately meets the eye, that get me beyond the obvious to discover some deeper or hidden truth or some greater wisdom. And it's like, I know it when it happens. There's just a handful of instances when I read a critic or read criticism, and the lights go off, and there's this kind of moment of epiphany or flashing light bulb, like, wow, my world is more interesting now. I know more than I did before I started. The vast majority of things I read, though, are tedious and dull and repetitive, and I actually wonder why the critic bothered to write them. Those are the ones where just like a little bit of description of what's there, or just kind of pontificating about issues that I think have nothing to do with the works, or things that are just like kind of fine accounts or assessments, but don't really say anything new or at all. And that's to me, that's kind of the fundamental or the inherently democratic nature of art criticism, or like the kind of criticism that I respect and try to practice, and that it always leaves the viewer and the reader in the position to determine the value of something. Nothing is taken on trust. It's always got to be tested against the person that's engaging it. So I think my writing is anti-elitist, democratic, inclusive, definitely participatory. If you're not, it's not a looky-loo game. If you're not engaged in doing it, it doesn't count at all. I think it's empowering. I think it invites other people to talk back, to look for themselves, and to see for themselves. And above all else, it's a conversation. I don't think that critics in any way get the last word with anything. I think what actually I do is like make when I write something about an exhibition or works in an exhibition, it's always inviting other people to consider it and to keep on talking, and not necessarily to talk back to me, but to continue a conversation with their friends. So I think of criticism as kind of like a conversation starter for getting ripple effects going and spreading out in time. All that said, I'm in the judgment business. Judgment these days seems to be something you're not supposed to do. The phrase we always, or I hear more and more lately, is "I'm not judging," and it's just like commenting. And I understand where it comes from, but it probably is a good way. I mean, I'm not sure it is a good way. I think judging prematurely is a problem, but I think actually, if as someone who's engaged with art, if you're not making judgments, you're really not doing your job, especially if you're a critic. What I do is try to steer people, readers, towards things that I think are worth their time, worth making the effort, worth getting engaged with, and worth investing in, either emotionally, in terms of time, or even economically. But it's not like the kind of reviews I can't stand are the ones that are just like, on the one hand, his work is interesting. On the other hand, it isn't. And you read all the way through, and by the end of it, I think like, I have no idea what that critic thinks about something. What I want to know what the critic thinks, and then I want to know the reasons why the critic thinks that. So then I have more information about coming up with my own interpretation or understanding of it. A lot of people also speak about criticism as it being my job as a critic to educate the general public so they can understand the work. I take education really seriously, and I take criticism really seriously, but I don't think it's my job as a critic to educate anyone. I think that's condescending and kind of demeaning towards the readers. To me, the analogy would be like you'd say you take French class in high school or grade school and high school and college, and you learn French. That's where you're learning French. But at a certain point, you got to go out in the world and start speaking it. And sure, you'll learn more as you're speaking it, but you're not primarily being taught anything. You're kind of on your own, learning things as you're living and seeing the world through the lens of that language. And I think that that's kind of what I do as a critic, that yeah, you can learn a lot from what I'm writing and what you're reading, but I'm not teaching you anything. And I think that it's wrong. It's not to me, it's not the right way to go at criticism. And to me, it presumes like, oh, the art is high and the viewer is low and beneath it, and they have to be elevated so they understand it. And I'm not into that sort of like faux elevation sort of thing. I'm not a historian. I write criticism. I think that the works that I cover are mostly recent ones. I don't know what's going to happen in history. I think a problem now is that's kind of, it goes to the distance thing I mentioned at the beginning, is that people think like yesterday is history, or that we have this instant history. I think that the works out there now, no one knows if they're going to make their way into history. What's going to be what's going to count then? Oh yeah, and I'll even more adamant am I about that is that I'm not I don't have nothing. What I do has nothing to do with maintaining standards. I'm not a gatekeeper or a bouncer. It's not about like, here's the inner sanctum that is where all great art resides, and I'm the doorman that either lets people in or doesn't. I don't work that way at all. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. A little had to get a picture in after all those words. And this is about, I want to make the point about elitism. It's often said and it's often believed, and people actually experience art as being an elitist endeavor. In my view, it's not elitist at all. I think that it does take time and engagement and work to understand. But if you're interested in it, you can come to understand it. The analogy I like to bring up is like reading the newspaper, and I look at the sports page, and I'll check the basketball scores, and I'll check the baseball scores, and I'll also pay attention to American football and a little bit of international soccer. But I don't care about hockey, and to me it doesn't resonate at all, and so I don't understand a thing at all about hockey. But I don't think that's because hockey is elitist. And I would just invite you to think about art the same way. I think a lot of people don't understand art, so they assume it's elitist because they don't get it. But I think the real problem is they're just not interested in art. And to me, if you're not interested in it, just go away. Leave it alone. I'm not going to expend the precious time I have on Earth bashing hockey because I don't understand it. For me, it's like, fine, other people can play it, be passionate about it, be fans about it, go to games and everything, but it's like, it's not my thing. And I think art is the same sort of way. I think that if I got interested in hockey, I could figure out who the good teams were, who the good players are. First, I'd have to figure out what the rules were, but all that stuff is there. And if I would just invest the time and the energy and make the effort and have friends interested, it would all just kind of happen. And I think after a few years, I could be a pretty great hockey fan. And I think that art works the same way, that if you're really interested in it, you immerse yourself in it, pay attention to it, follow it, enjoy it, and get to know it and develop actually some kind of expertise in it. After hockey, I like to go to Martin Luther because he provides kind of a diagram for the way I think of art, or the way my criticism works. And I want to set up this kind of parallel structure that before Luther, we had God, and then we had priests and the faithful. And the only way that the faithful could get to God was via the priests. The priests were kind of the go-between, or the access point from the faithful to the divinity. I think a lot of people treat art and critics and viewers the same way, where if art is God, critics are kind of the priests or the gatekeepers or the go-betweens, and that the only way that the viewers can get to art is via critics. To me, that's a pre-Lutheran understanding of art criticism. I really prefer to think of it like this, and this is what Luther did. He basically said that priests have access to God and the faithful have access to God, and they're basically on the same plane. And I think that it works the same way with art, where what I do as a critic is relate myself to art, my form of divinity, as intimately, passionately, with as great a focus as I can. And after I do that, I talk to people, talk to my public, talk to viewers, talk to readers, and say, here's my experience of art. Why don't you, dear member of the public, also relate yourself to that art, and then we can compare and contrast our experiences. So it's not that the public has to go through me to get to the art, but it's that I can talk to the public can talk to me, and we both relate ourselves to art. I may do it a lot more as a critic than most members of the public, but fundamentally, I don't think I'm at a higher level than the viewers, as the model is in the pre-Lutheran one. So I think of myself as a post-Luther art critic. And then here's just a handful of pieces of works that are from a column I wrote for the LA Times just before COVID shut down freelance writing at the Times. And this is a piece by Brenda Goldman. She is a New York artist who I had never I didn't know about at all. And I saw her works at the Landing in Los Angeles and was really moved by the forms and the colors and the textures. They're really beat up, tortured, tormented works that felt really like almost as raw as cave paintings. They really felt like Brenda was like kind of stirring the primordial soup and coming up with really cool and interesting things out of it. I think of her as a texturalist. It's kind of like a colorist, but the way she uses different paints, different materials, wood, canvas, carving into things, building things up, scraping things off, using a Dremel, it really makes the works have lots of different textures and a lot of power in those textures. I also like that they're like pretty, abstract paintings, but for me, lots of like references that almost came up in terms of like animals, insects, landscapes, sometimes vehicles, sometimes dwellings, but really kind of raw and vigorous and powerful stuff. But it's an example I use because like people a lot of times feel like, oh, you're the critic, you know so much about what's going on. And this is a show that, a year ago, I just walked into not having known anything at all about her. Maybe should be embarrassed that I never had heard of her, known her, but she hadn't shown in LA before, and has been working and showing in New York. So for me, it was this kind of stunning, joyous, wonderful discovery. And since meeting the works, I started a correspondence with her, and I've really had a great time having a back and forth by email. That's an early work of hers. It was a terrific show because it had lots of recent works and then also some earlier things. Oh, and this is the next piece is by Jessica Stockholder, a pretty well-known kind of assemblage artist. She had a work, a show at 1301 PE Gallery called First Prints and Editions of kind of common materials that she painted and arranged loosely and formally, either in 2 dimensions or in 3 dimensions. Lots of disemboweled computers and technological things and kind of scraps that could kind of Home Depot-ish sorts of things. Really simple things made to look like they hadn't been. I wrote about this show by saying
we just lost our stream. Hold on, folks. We'll get him back. There you are.
How much did we lose?
Just a couple seconds.
Okay.
It's running a little behind anyway on it, but go for it.
Am I a little too long, or? Oh no. Oh, so I wrote about Jessica Stockholder's work by inviting people to imagine what it would be like to be an astronaut on the space station who manages to shut off all the surveillance devices and then just find stuff on the space station and cobble together sculptures. And the work really had that kind of tinkerer's energy to it, this kind of like complete freedom to turn things that weren't meant to be turned into art, but were turned into art by the inventive artist. And one of the things I love about Stockholder's stuff is that it isn't made from materials that are meant to come with loads of emotional significance or resonance, like broken computers and cords and bungee cords and electrical cords and things like that, like just lamps and things you can buy at Home Depot, tarps and stuff aren't loaded with significance. So I like that she works with neutral things and then makes meaningful things out of them abstractly. And the final artist I wanted to talk about a little bit is Robert Levine, and he had a show at a medical marijuana store, because the medical marijuana store takes up very little space, and they had the counter where they sold the weed and the weed products, and the walls are all bare. And it was run by a dealer, Rory Devine, who was adapting to the new economy where he couldn't afford having a discrete gallery. So he did kind of the next best thing and had this show in the I don't know what, pot shop. I don't know what they're meant to be called. But Robert Levine had these paintings. I loved that they were each one seemed to be about something else, and with really common things, and painted in a way that was kind of like good enough to get the job done. Illusionism, not about being super realistic, but caring enough to like get it close. And like this is like two different things. One, a comparison between upside down and right side up, or yellow and red. And here's like large and small, but like really simple, direct paintings. Each one slightly different. And it was almost like in that setting at the pot shop, it was almost like, are these really works of art, or are they decorations for the store, or are they significant, profound moments, or just kind of everyday things? And there was just a kind of a nice resonance or overlap between the situation in which I found the works and what the works were doing. But really kind of like, also like, Morandi and the wood shop sort of thing. Oh, and then the last painting is a piece by Michael Riefschneider, just one of my all-time favorite artists, an abstract painter who squirts stuff out of the tube, never uses brushes, but uses palette knives, scraping, splotching, and laying it down, and then always putting a smiley face somewhere in the work when he finishes it off. This one also kind of is a little cat, and I just wanted to end with something bright and colorful and wonderful. And I think that like intellectually, the work is about showing that with this kind of, there's almost a sense of information overload in the painting, but I think that what Riefschneider is arguing for is that just because there's lots of information, we don't need to have diminished attention spans, and you can actually have loads and loads of info. And if you slow down and pay attention, you can actually see kind of a pictorial logic in there. So I think it's about the value of speed and slowing down, and just the joy in the exuberance of like color and gesture and paint. So I would be happy, and hopefully there's questions, and I'll try to find my way back from where I was. I hope I haven't lost.
If anybody has questions, post them and I will relay them to David. Right now, I don't have any questions except, are we recording this? And we are. And people really like the analogy of the Martin Luther analogy that a lot of people mentioned that was fantastic. And as a curator, and I feel the same way about any information I might know more than you do about something to begin with, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to end up knowing more about it than I do.
Yeah. And to me, it's never a contest of I know
right
no more. It's to me that it's like it's about loving things, being fascinated by things, being drawn to things, being confused by things, and then sharing some of that with other people. And it's amazing. One of the most satisfying experiences I've ever had as a writer is like when I've written about an artist's work, and then they'll write me like, and usually it's an artist I don't know, and they'll write me and say, thank you so much for that review. You said things about my work that I could never put into words, or I'd never been able to put into words, but it made it so clear that you deeply understood it. And for me, it's like, that's why I do what I do. But again, it doesn't, if I just asked them what it was, I couldn't get it from them. So for me, that's the importance of the distance. Like me doing my job as a critic and the artist doing their job as an artist, and something bigger and better comes up out of that.
We have some questions. Okay. Juror, who's in the exhibition, said this was very interesting given the pandemic and your process you described for us. What was it like to be a juror and critique art virtually? Was it the same or different?
It's really different. Although for a lot of juried shows, I do review them digitally. So that part was not different at all. But usually with the shows, then I get to go see them in the flesh, and that's always a lovely moment for me because I'll look at something like, oh, I would just have that in my head is like 4 feet by 6 feet, and it's actually 1 foot by 2 foot. For me, the digitally transmitted info is like a close approximation, sometimes not a not so close approximation, and it's always better to see the art in the flesh. To me, it's such a physical activity. So I miss that.
So another one of our artists in the contest, Celeste White, wants to know, when did you first realize you wanted to write about art?
Oh, it was my senior year in college. And all through college, I had never taken an art history course because I thought, and don't take this wrong, sorority girls, I thought it was about for sorority girls to take at lunchtime so they could chat about art. And I ended up taking an American Art Since 1945 course, and the first time it was like, go read some of the things people have said about these works by Frank Stella, and I read them and I thought like, that's not what the work is about. And I also thought like, I could do that, and that just got me started. And I loved treating works of art as if they deserved to be talked about in a better way than they had been talked about. And it was just something I really, really enjoyed doing. A lot of people say, like, well, have you ever been an artist? Like, I've made art, but it's just awful. And I realized, like, I have no talent or real aptitude for it. And it's really hard for me to make something up out of nothing. But if you put me in front of something, I can talk about it. And it's something I really like, it just felt right.
All right. That's a great answer. So another, Giselle Albright said, Brenda who, please?
Oh, Brenda Goodman. Can I type?
Okay.
Yeah, it's Goodman.
Okay. Perfect.
She's amazing. Look her up. She's amazing.
Yeah, that's really. And then
she's been
Carrie, yeah.
Sorry. She's been making work for a long, long time.
So Carrie Lederer, who was our juror 2 years ago, she says, "Hi, David. Carrie Lederer, thanks for including my work. Tell us what's exciting you in the art world globally."
Oh, I'm really excited with something that I think I've seen bubbling up in lots of works is kind of the relationship between individuals and groups, and then from and kind of like and then groups into species. I guess it's like this kind of budding sense of speciesism. I don't know if it's a thing, but to me, it's like something that's maybe moving away from or beyond this idea of identity is something that separates us into different camps or groups or tribes, and isn't just, it's not like a kind of internationalism that the communists were really into, although I have sympathies with that, but it's almost more of us like human animals, and it's coming with the awareness of global warming, the interconnectedness of the whole world, where if we can't snuff out COVID everywhere, we can't snuff it out anywhere. And to me, there's a greater kind of awareness of the connectedness of humans. And I think that's bubbling up in art in lots of different ways, and really kind of shifting away from like, I'm a great genius maker of masterpieces, and more of like, I'm kind of a drone bee in the hive.
So Jennifer also said, she said, that may be your art form then, is writing about art.
It's my thing. and I don't I hesitate to call it art. I think of it as a craft. But I appreciate it being thought of as an art. But I like I'm much more into the humility of it as a craft. And I'm also like, I mean, lately it seems like everyone's an artist. Like you can't go to a bar and have your bartender make you a drink without him being revered as a mixologist, or going to the deli and your ham sandwich is a curated ham sandwich. I'm just like, it can just be a ham sandwich, and it can just be a great cocktail. So I'm hesitant to call like, oh, I'm a critic and my work is the work of art. I'm perfectly happy to keep it simple.
I as a curator, I'd like to take back that word curated. People are like, oh, look, I arranged some things. My merchandise is curated. I'm like, no, you laid it out in color order. That's nice, but that's not curated. And but it's okay. You know, I'm learning to accept that word is getting used differently. The whole world wants to be a museum.
I used to be a stickler and say it's not a verb. A curator is a person, and what they do is not curate. But I mean, we've been doing lunch forever, and our language is way slippier, more slipperier. Is slipperier these days than it's ever been. So I let it slide. It's like,
yeah,
no, the pillows in your sofa aren't curated. You just threw them there.
Well, my husband was told he was officing at home, and he said, since when is office a verb? So yeah, it's a weird world we're living in right now. And I am just so excited that we did have such a great turnout to enter the contest this year, knowing that it might not ever be seen, you know, live. And that it was really a great opportunity for like you to test out the whole like virtual jurying, for us to test out having it online and having this talk virtually, because this is a way that people join us who wouldn't necessarily be able to come because they live thousands of miles away. And so it's spreading a great word about a really fun contest, but also kind of what a newspaper art critic does, because you hear the word critic and you think, oh, that's the guy that walks in and goes, oh, no, take it down.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Amanda, our assistant curator, who you've met virtually,
Yeah.
she said, David, I love your explanations of how art or movies, etc. critics act almost as a proxy for an individual who couldn't possibly see all the art or all the movies, but would appreciate a dear friend whose opinion they trust to give them a recommendation.
Yeah.
That's how I.
That's a great way of putting it. I really think that's true. It's basically there's too much stuff out there to experience it all, and like having a guide you trust is really valuable. Like we do that with our friends with like, what's a good restaurant? Where are the good shoe stores? And if you can find a critic who kind of steers you in the right way, it's helpful. In a way, I am kind of a filter and an amplifier. But it's always like it's social and it's public and it's sharing. It's like helping the flows of information that lead to experiences that can be, you know, more valuable. And it's like, yeah, I love reading book reviews, so I don't have to read the whole book. You know, like
That's the Cliff Notes. That's how old I am. Cliff Notes. So Stacy Gregory, another biennial artist, said, what is more challenging to critique, abstract art or social justice art? And what is your criteria for both?
Yeah, it's I got started writing about abstract art and I did simply because other people weren't doing it. People really wanted narrative art, representational art. They drew to that to get the story. So part of the reason I went towards abstraction is because there was a gap in the world that I could fill. But I also loved abstraction because to me it invites the imagination in more actively. Now, judging art on its own terms. So I think I can do both with social justice art and abstract art. And I like sometimes the way, to me, the most interesting works aimed at political change, enlist formalism and texture, color, shape, and all that stuff in really interesting ways. So I really love when they fit together and don't become such an either or thing. I'm also like when I start asking what is a work doing, I try to figure out, is it really about changing things in the world? And sometimes I kind of feel that um, um, and not real recently, but in the past, it's been about the artist wanting to kind of take art credit for trying to do activist things in the world. And I don't think you really need to get your art credit for doing good things in the world. So I found that part to be a little disingenuous and opportunistic, if that makes any sense.
Let me see. Have any new questions? Any more questions out there, folks? The chat is open. Not seeing anything popping up. Well, there's a little bit of a lag too.
I'll answer anything.
My joke. Fred from Fresno wants to know what your favorite color is.
Purple.
Purple.
I like purple, and I like people who like purple.
You have to come hang out in our guest service manager's office. She is a purple person, and she has nice purple decor.
Good.
All right. I'm not seeing anything else pop up.
Yep.
And you can always ask questions afterward, and we will try to get messages to David. And he's in the LA Times. You can find him. He's not hiding from you. And please, the exhibition is open to the public. We are open at 25% capacity. I have one more question. And you can book a time to come in. We ask you book a time because it's actually been incredibly busy in the museum, and we have a limit of the number of people we're allowed to have in at any given time. So Celeste says, I do love the invitation that abstract art gives the viewer to come up with their own interpretation. Mm-hmm. And then, hold on. Amanda, a personal anecdote, RE art critiquing while we wait for questions. But then I have a question. How can you tell when it's disingenuous versus really real feeling?
Yeah, that was, I was referring to, like, where, to me, it actually hasn't been happening recently, but when I was getting involved in art in the late 80s and early 90s, there would be like a group of artists who would, like, to me, they're almost like they pretended they wanted to do activist stuff out in the world, but they didn't want to do activist stuff out in the world that just meant anonymous and pounding the pavement and the long, slow work of political change. They wanted to get attention from the art world for having the right political convictions. And to me, it was like just kind of like, I really just want to pat myself on the back and appeal to people who think like me by hanging up these poster-like things in the gallery and talking about what social change might look like. And so to me, it was like, if intending good works is a lot different than actually doing good works in terms of social justice, in the same way that intending to make a good painting is a lot different than actually making a good painting. And I think you can judge the painting on whether or not it works by what's there. And I think that good works socially, you can also judge that if the people are like, are they really out there doing stuff, or kind of just like going through the motions of doing stuff so I get art credit from my professors.
You're saying that not everyone is Banksy.
That's right.
Okay, another question. Lynn asked, okay, you mentioned earlier access to really open your mind to see art. What do you do to get to that place?
You have to have a good night's sleep and food, and not be in a rush, and not be tired. And I've gone, sometimes when I see lots of shows, after a while I burn out and I like stop seeing stuff, and then like I'll go back a couple weeks later and see the show and like, oh my gosh, the show is actually amazing. I just missed it. So it's like, fruits and vegetables and yeah.
So it's like an overload thing. You don't want to absorb the show.
Yeah, or if I'm in a really foul mood, it's not a good time to talk to people or to look at art.
That's, yeah. I mean, because you're going to take your mental mindset with you
Yeah.
to the gallery, and that may change completely how you view things.
Yeah.
You know, I like to take a deep breath before I walk into a show and just sort of forget I leave everything at the door.
Yeah. But sometimes it's just like, well, it's a busy day and I'm in a bad mood and I'm harried and I'm rushed and I'm behind schedule and I've got to be here. And you walk in the gallery and it's like, this is just what I needed. And then it's like all the crap washes away and you can engage the stuff fully with focus. But it's like, you know, it's being focused and being present.
We've got about 3 more minutes, folks, if anyone else has any questions. And I'm loving the questions that are popping up and the comment. I've been reading them all. Not censoring anybody, except for that one where someone said that Amanda said we're frozen, but I think she's frozen because I'm actually watching 2 other feeds other than us at the same time. It's very confusing because everything's off a little bit. We're learning about the platform. As I said, if anyone has questions, feel free to find him in the LA Times or email us and come see the exhibition, really. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Everyone's hard work in there. And
the team did an amazing job with the installation. I didn't get to see the flesh, but she carried her laptop around back and forth at my instruction. I thought, little to the left, little to the right. And I really liked the juxtaposition, the positioning, the whole array. It really felt like the show really holds together. And
okay, so Alice Peremsky writes, LA is a fantastic place for pop-up art galleries. Do you go to all the time, or do you write about them all, or do you just keep or at least keep notes about pop-ups?
I go to as many as I can, but I can't keep up with everything. That's interesting. When I started writing about art in LA, like in 1988, I could see just about every gallery in a day, and those days are long. There's just too many. Traffic is worse, and you can't see them all. But I try to see them, and what I do, I don't see every show everywhere, but as a critic, I don't care where I see the work. And the rule is that the place has to have regular hours. It can't just be by appointment only. And it's like, whether it's at, a place called 5 Car Garage or Gagosian Gallery, I'll treat the art as art. And I don't review the venue, I review the work in the show.
That's really great. That's important because so much stuff is popping up in really interesting places.
Yeah. And it can be a really cool pop-up show and the work is boring and conventional, or it can be amazing and you just have to look at the work. It doesn't matter where it is, even in a pot shop.
Well, thank you so much. We've reached the end of our hour, and this has been a big. I always wondered how art critics operate. Read art criticism, just know, like, if I'm going to go to Los Angeles and I know I'm going to be in town at a specific time, I'm going to read what's going on in galleries, art history, all the different museums, see what people are saying, so that I know where I want to go spend my time, because there is so much to see out there. And I think that's a wonderful thing about art criticism, is that it can open a door. Like you said, it's more like a movie critic. It's like, I like this art critic. I know I'm going to want to see this stuff. I'm going to open my mind to something, rather than it's like, quote unquote, criticism.
Right.
And you're not just going, oh, this is bad and that's good.
Yeah.
You're telling people what it is. That they're going to go see.
And to me, that's the fun of it. They were, figuring things out and sharing that info.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I want to thank you again so much, and hopefully maybe you'll make it up here before April 11th. We'll take some more photos. We've had to jail the sculptures so the children don't hug them. They're all my railings now. They're very popular. So like I said, I'm really excited that we're back open and people get to see this exhibition live. People are voting for the People's Choice Awards. You can still do that by emailing us at biennial@turtlebay.org. And Amanda is keeping track of all that. She's got a spreadsheet for the People's Choice Award. We're excited that, get your vote in. And because we're emailing, we know if you vote more than once. But you can also come in and we don't have the ballot boxes up this year because we didn't have COVID. we didn't want more pencils and papers out there. But we are super excited by the reception that the public has given it in person. So thank you. All right, I'm going to turn this off so everyone can go off and do their evening things. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.